to learn how to help guide a new world into the light. Every hand in the room went up, regardless of species. Marcus felt his heart swell. This was the future they had fought for, not one species dominating another, but all of them growing together, learning from each other. Later that evening, they gathered in the Garden of Remembrance. Crystal monuments honored those who had been lost, the original luminary victims of Shadowcorp's aggression, the brave souls who had fought to protect the children. Even the Void Hunters themselves, now understood not as enemies, but as a reminder of what happened when light and dark fell out of balance. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" Lyra asked, sitting beside Marcus on their favorite bench. Above them, the stars shone with renewed brightness, as if the very galaxy itself was celebrating the harmony they had achieved. Marcus thought back to that first moment on Europa, when he had found a scared child in a stasis pod. "Not in my wildest dreams," he admitted. "But that's the thing about light, it shows us possibilities we never knew existed." A group of children ran past, playing a game that combined human sports with luminary light manipulation. Their laughter echoed through the crystal gardens, a sound of pure joy that needed no translation between species. "The university committee approved your proposal," Lyra mentioned, her patterns shifting with excitement. "We're officially opening the Department of Interspecies Family Studies next semester." That had been Marcus's passion project, helping other mixed families like theirs navigate the challenges and joys of bridging different worlds. What had begun with one human protecting one luminary child had blossomed into a movement that was reshaping society itself. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us," he said, looking out at the growing community around them. "A whole galaxy to help guide into the light." Lyra smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. Where they touched, their patterns synchronized, not merging, but harmonizing, each remaining distinct while creating something beautiful together. "Good thing we're not alone anymore," she said softly. As night fell, the sanctuary moon began its own light show, a daily reminder of the victory they had achieved. Patterns of energy danced through the crystal spires, telling the story of darkness transformed into light, of enemies becoming family, of different species learning to see the universe through each other's eyes. Marcus watched as Lyra joined a group of her students, beginning the evening meditation that would send waves of healing light throughout the galaxy. This was their legacy, not just the defeat of darkness, but the creation of something entirely new. A future where the light of understanding bridged every gap, healed every wound, and showed the way forward for all. The stars sparkled overhead, each one a reminder of the infinite possibilities that lay ahead. Marcus smiled, feeling the warmth of the community they had built together. Sometimes the greatest adventures didn't end with a battle won or an enemy defeated. Sometimes they ended with a new beginning, with the first light of a dawn that would never fade. In the growing darkness, the sanctuary moon glowed like a jewel, a promise kept, a dream realized. And in its light, countless stories were just beginning, each one a testament to the truth that had saved them all. That the strongest force in the universe wasn't power or technology or even light itself. It was the love that taught them how to shine together. A light reborn. 5 years had passed since the great battle that had transformed the galaxy. The sanctuary moon, once hidden in the folds of space-time, now orbited proudly in open space, its crystalline spires a beacon of hope for all who saw them. But the real changes went far deeper than mere location. Marcus stood in what had once been the Grand Archive, now transformed into the Center for Harmonic Studies. Human and luminary children studied side by side, learning to understand each other's ways. Through the vast windows, he could see the fruits of their shared knowledge, gardens where plants from 100 worlds grew together, their growth guided by the combined wisdom of both species. Lost in thought again, Lyra's voice pulled him from his reverie. At 16, she had grown into her power with grace and wisdom. The patterns on her skin now moved with confident purpose, and her star-filled eyes held depths of understanding that sometimes took his breath away. "Just remembering," he replied, smiling at his daughter. Legal adoption between species hadn't existed before the battle, But that had been one of the first things to change. Hard to believe how far we've come. Lyra took his hand, and familiar patterns of light danced between them. Their bond had only grown stronger over the years, deepening into something that bridged the gap between their different natures. The new students are arriving today, she reminded him. First Groot from the former Shadow Corp worlds. That was still strange to think about. After the battle, with their corruption cleansed by the children's light, the Shadow Corp crews had undergone a profound transformation. Their corporations had been dismantled, their technology repurposed for creation rather than destruction. Many had become the strongest advocates for cooperation between species. They walked together through the bustling halls of the center. Everywhere, signs of change were visible. Human scientists worked alongside luminary elders, combining technical knowledge with ancient wisdom. Children of both species played together, their laughter mixing with the soft chiming of crystalline architecture. In one classroom, Sarah, now the center's head of Xenoscience, was teaching a group of students about the nature of light itself. Her holographic displays showed the complex patterns that the children had created during the battle, now understood as a new branch of physics that united human and luminary understanding of the universe. "Ready for your class?" Marcus asked as they approached the central chamber. Lyra nodded. She had become a teacher herself, helping others understand the power of connection that had saved them all. They need to understand it wasn't just about power, she said. It was about finding harmony between different ways of being. The chamber doors opened to reveal a group of 30 students, human and luminary children, but also representatives from a dozen other species that had joined their community over the years. Each brought their own unique perspective on the universe, their own way of understanding the light that bound all things together. "Welcome," Lyra began, her voice carrying the music of stars. "Today you're going to learn about the most important lesson of all, how to see the light in each other." Marcus watched with pride as she began her lesson. The children's faces lit up with wonder as she demonstrated how different types of energy could work together, how seemingly opposite forces could create something greater than themselves. A soft chime indicated a visitor. Varen entered the chamber, now the head of the newly formed Galactic Council of Light. The years had added depth to his patterns, but also joy. "The survey ships have returned," he announced. They found 3 more worlds showing signs of awakening light sensitivity. This was perhaps the most profound change of all. The wave of pure creation that had defeated the Void Hunters hadn't just transformed their sector of space, it had awakened something dormant in countless species. New forms of light sensitivity were emerging across the galaxy, each unique, each offering a new way of seeing the universe. "We'll send teachers," Lyra said without hesitation. She looked at her students. Who wants? But something was wrong. The hunters hesitated, their darkness wavering as they approached the spinning mandala of light. "It's working," Sarah exclaimed. "The frequency patterns, they're creating a resonance cascade." The children's light grew brighter, each layer of their geometric pattern amplifying the others. Where their power touched the Void Hunters, darkness transformed back into light. Reality reasserted itself, healing the tears made by the engine. Director Vale's voice crackled through the chaos. "No, fire everything. Break them." The Shadow Corp fleet concentrated all their weapons on the sanctuary, but it was too late. The children's power had reached critical mass. Light exploded outward in a wave of pure creation, sweeping through space like a cleansing fire. Where it touched the Void Hunters, they dissolved, their darkness transformed into stardust. The corrupted ships began to change, their twisted metal returning to its natural state. Even the massive engine shuddered as the wave hit it, its dark crystal structure cracking and splintering. But the strain on the children was enormous. Marcus could see them trembling with effort, their patterns flickering as they channeled more power than any luminary had ever attempted. "Hold on," he shouted, running to them. "Just a little longer." He reached Lyra just as her knees buckled. Without hesitation, he took her hand, offering his own strength through their bond. The other children's guardians did the same, forming an outer circle around their charges. Something miraculous happened then. The adult support didn't just steady the children, it transformed their power. The mandala of light expanded, incorporating new patterns, new frequencies. Human determination merged with luminary power, creating something entirely new. The wave of light became a tsunami, sweeping through the entire sector of space. Every ship, every molecule, every particle of darkness was touched by its power. But instead of destroying, it transformed. The Void Hunters vanished completely, sealed away not by force, but by the fundamental rewriting of space itself. The engine imploded, collapsing in on itself as its corrupted energy was purified. The Shadow Corp fleet hung motionless, their crews frozen in a moment of profound realization as they witnessed the true nature of the power they had tried to steal. Finally, slowly the light began to fade. The children lowered their hands, exhausted but triumphant. The mandala dissolved into gentle motes of light that drifted through the air like snow. "Did we do it?" Lara asked weakly, leaning against Marcus. "Did we stop them?" Marcus looked out at space, now filled with newborn stars where darkness had been moments before. "You did more than stop them," he said softly. "You showed them a better way." The sanctuary sensors confirmed what they could all feel. The Void Hunters were gone, sealed away so completely that even the memory of their darkness was fading. The engine was destroyed, its corrupted power transformed into pure creative energy that was already giving birth to new worlds. And in the Shadow Corp ships, something had changed. The crews were alive, unharmed, but their minds had been touched by the light. They had seen, finally, the truth that the Luminary had known all along. That the greatest power comes not from taking, but from sharing. Not from darkness, but from light. As the children recovered, supported by their guardians and friends, Marcus realized that this wasn't just a victory over an enemy. It was the beginning of something new. A future where humans and Luminary could work together, where light and dark could find balance, where family meant more than blood or species. "What happens now?" Lyra asked, looking up at him with tired but happy eyes. Marcus smiled, pulling her close. Now we build something better. Together." The sanctuary moon glowed with renewed light, a beacon of hope in a transformed galaxy. The war was over, but the real work, the work of creation, of understanding, of building bridges between different peoples, was just beginning. And as Marcus held Lyra, watching the other children and their guardians celebrate their victory, he knew that they would face whatever came next the same way they had faced everything else, as one family, bound together by love, courage, and the eternal light of hope. When darkness falls, the warning came not with alarms or sensors, but with silence. One by one, the stars visible from the sanctuary moon began to dim, as if being swallowed by an invisible tide of darkness. Marcus stood in the command center, watching as entire systems winked out of existence on their long-range scanners. "They're coming," Lyra said quietly beside him. In the 6 months since discovering the truth about the Void Hunters, she had grown taller, stronger. The patterns on her skin now moved with purpose and precision, each shift carrying meaning. But they're not alone. The main display activated, showing a massive fleet emerging from the darkness. Shadow Court ships, hundreds of them, but changed. Their hulls now seemed to absorb light itself, leaving trails of nothingness in their wake. At the center of the fleet was something that made Marcus's heart stop, the luminous engine. It was larger than any station he'd ever seen, a twisted monument of metal and darkness shaped like a massive black crystal. Energy pulses rippled across its surface, but instead of the warm glow of luminary power, these were anti-light, holes in reality itself. Director Vale sends her regards, a distorted voice transmitted across all frequencies. "Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick. Resist and watch as we feed your essence to our new allies." Through the viewing window, Marcus could see them, shapes moving within the darkness between ships. The Void Hunters. They weren't fully corporeal yet, but each pulse of the engine brought them closer to breaking through into their reality. Everyone to their positions, Marcus ordered through the sanctuary's communications system. This is what we've trained for. The response was immediate. Throughout the crystalline city, lights began to pulse in sequence as their plan went into action. The 13 luminary children gathered in the central plaza, their powers already beginning to merge and flow. Adult luminary took defensive positions, their combined light creating shields and barriers around the sanctuary. Sora's voice came through Marcus's communicator. The calculations are ready. If we time this right, we'll only get one chance. Then we better make it count, Marcus replied. He turned to Lyra, who stood ready with her companions. Are you sure about this? Lyra's star-filled eyes met his, and he saw in them not just determination, but absolute certainty. We all are, she said, speaking for all the children. This is what we were meant to do. The past 6 months had revealed an ancient truth. The luminary children weren't just powerful, they were keys to something greater. Their ability to work in harmony, to merge their lights while maintaining their individuality, was more than just a defensive technique. It was a way to tap into the fundamental forces of creation itself. The Shadowcorp fleet opened fire, countless beams of corrupted energy striking the sanctuary's shields. The adult luminari strained to maintain their defenses, but the darkness was unlike anything they'd faced before. Where it touched, reality itself seemed to fray. Now, Lyra, Marcus commanded. The children moved as one, their circle expanding as streams of pure light flowed between them. But this time, instead of merging their powers, they did something new, something they discovered during their months of preparation. Each child began to glow with their own unique frequency, their patterns forming complex geometric shapes in the air. As Marcus watched, these patterns began to overlap and interact, creating a 3-dimensional mandala of living light that spanned the entire plaza. The engine is powering up, Sarah reported urgently. They're trying to create a breach. Through the viewing windows, Marcus could see it, a massive tear forming in space itself, dark tentacles of void energy reaching through. The void hunters were coming, drawn by the engine's corrupted power. But the children were ready. As the tear in reality widened, their mandala of light began to spin, faster and faster, each layer moving in a different direction. The very air seemed to vibrate with potential. Remember, Lyra called out to her companions, her voice carrying the strength of stars. Not just our light, everything's light, every atom, every particle, every possibility. Marcus felt it then. Through his connection with Lyra, they weren't just channeling energy, they were tapping into the light that existed in all things, the fundamental force that bound reality together. The Void Hunters emerged fully now, their forms defying description, living darkness that consumed everything they touched. They surged toward the sanctuary, drawn by the children's power. Marcus stepped closer to Lyra, feeling the familiar warmth of their connection. Through it, he sensed something new, not just power, but understanding. The children weren't just using their abilities, they were becoming one with them. We can see it now, Lyra explained, her voice resonating with the combined wisdom of her peers. The engine isn't just a machine, it's a key to something ancient and dark, something that's been waiting. Varen's face paled. The Void Hunters, he whispered. The old stories, they weren't just legends. What are you talking about? Marcus asked, though part of him didn't want to know. Long ago, Varen explained, before our people mastered the light, there were others. Beings of pure darkness who fed on stars, on life itself. Our ancestors fought them, sealed them away in spaces between spaces. But if Shadowcorp's engine works, they'll break free, Lyra finished. And this time, they'll have Shadowcorp's technology to help them spread, to help them consume everything. The archive fell silent as the weight of this revelation settled over them. The stakes weren't just about protecting the Luminari children anymore. They were about saving existence itself. But as Marcus looked at the determined faces of the children, at the way they stood together without fear, he felt something else growing alongside his concern: hope. Then we fight, he declared, not just to protect ourselves, but to protect everything. Every world, every life, every possible future. Lyra smiled, taking his hand. Where their skin touched, patterns of light danced between them. Together, she said, the way we always have. The other children moved closer, each adding their own light to the connection. Sarah joined them, her scientific instruments recording readings that would revolutionize human understanding of the universe. Even Varen stepped forward, his ancient wisdom merging with their youthful strength. As they stood there, united in purpose, Marcus realized that this was what the Luminary's power had always been meant for. Not for war or dominance, but for bringing people together. For lighting the way forward when darkness threatened to consume everything. The sanctuary moon continued its eternal dance through hidden space, a beacon of hope in an increasingly dangerous galaxy. Within its crystalline halls, a new kind of family was forming, one bound not by blood or species, but by a shared commitment to protecting the light that lived in all things. We should begin preparing, Varen said finally. Shadow Corp will find us eventually. We need to be ready. Marcus nodded, looking down at Lyra with pride and determination. Then let's get started. We've got a universe to save. The children cheered, their combined light momentarily turning night into day. As they dispersed to begin their preparations, Marcus held Lyra back for a moment. Are you scared? He asked softly. Lyra considered the question, her star-filled eyes thoughtful. A little, she admitted. But you taught me that being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right anyway. Marcus pulled her into a hug, feeling the warmth of her light merge with his own inner strength. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever darkness threatened to consume them, they would face it as they had faced everything else, together, one step at a time, lighting the way forward for each other. The battle for the universe's soul was coming, but on this hidden moon, surrounded by the combined light of hope and determination, Marcus knew they had already won the most important victory of all. They had found each other. Echoes of light. The sanctuary moon hung like a jewel in the darkness of space, its surface shimmering with the combined light of thousands of crystalline structures. After their victory over the Shadowcorp fleet, the Haven's light had brought them here, the last true home of the Luminary people, hidden within a fold of space-time itself. Marcus stood at a vast window in the Grand Archive, watching Lyra and the other children train in the gardens below. Their powers had grown exponentially in the months since their arrival, but so had the shadow looming over them all. Beautiful, isn't it? Sarah approached, carrying several ancient data crystals. The way they worked together now, like a constellation coming to life. Below, the children were practicing a new technique. Lyra stood in the center as the others orbited around her, streams of light flowing between them like rivers of starfire. Plants sprouted and bloomed wherever the light touched, transforming the garden into a paradise of impossible colors. They're not just getting stronger, Marcus observed. They're getting smarter about how they use their powers, more creative. They need to be. Varen's voice came from behind them. The elder luminary looked tired, the patterns on his skin moving slavishly. We've decoded more of the Shadowcorp data. The luminous engine, it's worse than we imagined. Sarah activated a holographic display, showing a massive structure hidden within an asteroid field. They're not just trying to drain our people's power, she explained. They're trying to rewrite the fundamental laws of reality itself, to remake the universe in their image. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. How? The engine acts as a focal point, Varen said, his voice heavy. It doesn't just absorb light and energy, it corrupts it, turns it dark. If they succeed, they could create a cascade effect that would spread across the galaxy. Everything the light touches would become twisted. A small voice spoke up from the doorway. Then we'll stop them. They turned to see Lyra standing there, her chest heaving slightly from her training. The other children gathered behind her, their combined glow filling the room with warmth. It's not that simple, Varen began, but Lyra cut him off. It is that simple, she insisted. You've been teaching us about the ancient ways, about how our ancestors used their powers. But you've also been afraid to push too far, afraid of what we might become. She stepped forward, and Marcus felt a surge of pride at the confidence in her stance. She wasn't the frightened child he'd rescued anymore. She was becoming something more. We understand now, Lyra continued, gesturing to the other children. The light isn't just about power or control, it's about connection, about harmony. We've been practicing something new. The children moved as one, forming a circle in the center of the archive. As Marcus watched, their patterns began to synchronize, but differently than before. Instead of merging into a single pattern, they remained distinct while flowing together, like instruments in an orchestra. The air itself seemed to come alive with possibility. Books floated off shelves, their pages fluttering as ancient knowledge danced through the air. The holographic displays sparked and shifted, showing not just data, but the very fabric of reality itself. Incredible, Sarah breathed, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing. They're not just manipulating energy, they're reading the underlying code of the universe. Marcus was about to respond when he felt a familiar presence. Lyra stood in the doorway, but she wasn't alone. All 13 luminary children stood with her, their patterns glowing in perfect synchronization. We won't let them take us, Lyra declared, her voice carrying echoes of ancient power. We won't let them hurt anyone else. The other children nodded in agreement. Marcus saw in their eyes the same determination he'd come to know in Lyra's. These weren't just scared refugees anymore. They were warriors, protecting their future. Lyra, no, he started, but she cut him off with a smile. You taught me to be brave, Marcus. You showed me that sometimes we have to fight for what's right. Let us fight now. The children joined hands, forming a circle. Light began to pour from them, not just the usual gentle glow, but waves of pure energy that made the ship's systems surge and spark. What are they doing? Sarah asked in awe. Varen's eyes were wide, something that hasn't been done since the ancient days. They're linking their powers, becoming one light. Marcus watched in amazement as the children's individual patterns merged into a single brilliant design. The ship's corridors filled with blinding light, and through his bond with Lyra, he felt something extraordinary, not just power, but purpose. Director Vale, Lyra's voice rang out, now harmonized with all the children's voices. You think you understand the light. You think you can take it, control it. But the light isn't just power, it's life itself. And life cannot be stolen, it can only be given. The Shadow Corp ships opened fire, but their weapons dissipated harmlessly against a shield of pure light that now surrounded the haven's light. The children's combined power reached out, touching each enemy vessel. But they didn't destroy them. Instead, Marcus watched in awe as the black ships began to change. Light poured into them, through them, revealing the truth that Shadow Corp had tried so hard to hide. The darkness within their own technology, the corruption at their core. By the stars, Sarah breathed. They're purifying them. One by one, the Shadow Corp ships went dark, their weapons and engines shutting down. But the crews remained unharmed, left to witness what true power wielded with compassion and wisdom, really looked like. The children lowered their hands, the light fading to its normal gentle glow. Lyra swayed, and Marcus caught her before she could fall. Did we do good? She asked tiredly. Marcus held her close, tears in his eyes. You did amazing, little one. All of you did. But Varen's expression remained troubled. This isn't over. Shadow Corp will send more ships, more weapons, and the children cannot maintain that level of power for long. Then we'll find another way, Marcus declared. Together. He looked at Lyra, then at all the children. These kids aren't just our future, they're our hope, and hope is worth fighting for. As if in response, the patterns on all the children's skin pulsed once, filling the bridge with warm light. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. Shadow Corp would return, probably with their luminous engine, but they would be ready. Because now they knew the truth. The real power of the Luminari wasn't in their ability to manipulate light and energy. It was in their capacity for love, for sacrifice, for standing together against the darkness. As Marcus held Lyra, watching the disabled Shadowcorp ships drift harmlessly in space, he realized something profound. Sometimes the greatest victories don't come from destroying your enemies, but from showing them a better way. The light wasn't just a weapon or a tool, it was a teacher, showing them all a path towards something greater than themselves. The Haven's light sailed on through the stars, carrying its precious cargo of hope and possibility. The journey ahead would be dangerous, but they would face it together, humans and Luminari, adults and children, all united by a simple truth, that the strongest light shines not from power or technology, but from the heart. Shadows of truth. The Luminari Sanctuary ship, Haven's Light, was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Its crystalline corridors seemed alive, pulsing with gentle light that responded to the emotions of those who walked through them. After a week aboard, he was still discovering new wonders around every corner. But it was the other children that truly amazed him. 12 young Luminari, each saved from different corners of the galaxy, each with their own unique gifts. Watching Lyra interact with them filled his heart with joy. She was no longer alone, no longer the last of her kind. "Watch this, Marcus." Lyra called from the training chamber. She stood in a circle with 3 other children, their hands linked. Above them, light coalesced into complex shapes, entire star systems in miniature, dancing and swirling with impossible grace. Marcus smiled, but his expression turned serious as Varen approached. The elder Luminari's face was troubled. "We need to talk," Varen said quietly, "about what we've discovered." They walked to a private chamber, where holographic displays showed data streams that hurt Marcus's eyes to look at directly. Sarah was already there, her scientific expertise having proved invaluable in understanding the information they gathered. "It's worse than we thought," Sarah began without preamble. "Shadowcorp didn't just attack the Luminari by chance. They've been planning this for centuries." Varen nodded gravely. "We've decoded more of the data Lyra unconsciously absorbed from their systems during your escape. The truth is disturbing." The displays shifted, showing historical records that made Marcus's blood run cold. Shadowcorp had been watching the Luminari for generations, studying them from afar, learning their weaknesses. The genocide hadn't been just about profit, it had been about power. "They believe they can harness our children's abilities," Varen explained, his voice heavy with sorrow. "Not just use them, but extract their essence, transfer it to their own kind." Marcus felt sick. That's why they want Lyra so badly. She's not just powerful, she's pure potential, untrained, adaptable. "Precisely," Sarah confirmed. "And there's more. The data suggests they're close to succeeding. They've built something, a device they call the Luminous Engine. It's designed to drain the light from our children, to steal their very essence." "Not just the children," Varen added quietly. "All of us. They believe they can use the engine to absorb the power of an entire species, to become like gods." Marcus's fists clenched. "How long?" "Days, maybe hours. They're tracking us, Marcus. Every time we use our powers, every time our children practice, we leave traces, like breadcrumbs leading right to us." As if to emphasize the point, alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. Marcus rushed to the bridge, Varen and Sarah close behind. The main display showed multiple ships emerging from hyperspace, the largest Shadowcorp fleet they'd seen yet. "They found us," Sarah whispered. But something was wrong. The Shadowcorp ships weren't attacking. Instead, they formed a perimeter, boxing in the Haven's light. A transmission cut through their communications. "Attention, Luminari vessel," a cold voice announced. "This is Director Elena Vale of Shadowcorp Special Projects. We have you surrounded. Surrender the children and the adults will be spared. Resist, and we will take them by force. The transmission cut off as the first volley of weapons fire lit up space around them. 5 Shadowcorp destroyers emerged from hyperspace, their black holes seeming to devour the starlight around them. "They're jamming all frequencies," Sarah reported, her fingers dancing across her console. "We can't communicate with the Luminary ship." Marcus snapped into action. "James, evasive maneuvers. Sarah, divert all power to shields." He turned to Lyra, kneeling to meet her eyes. "Remember what we've been practicing? About working together." Lyra nodded, her face set with determination. Over the past weeks, they had discovered that her powers grew stronger when they combined their strengths, his experience and instincts, with her natural abilities. The patterns on her skin began to glow brighter. "Everyone, hold on to something," Marcus ordered. He sat in the captain's chair, pulling Lyra onto his lap. Together, they placed their hands on the ship's controls. The connection was immediate and overwhelming. Through Lyra's powers, Marcus could feel the ship as if it were an extension of his own body. Every system, every circuit hummed with possibility. More than that, he could feel the space around them, the currents of energy, the flows of light and darkness. "Ready?" he asked. Lyra smiled, her eyes now blazing like supernovas. "Ready." The Stellar Scout moved like it never had before. They weren't just flying, they were dancing through space itself. Where Marcus's decades of experience told him the maneuver was impossible, Lyra's powers made it reality. They wove between enemy ships, their wake leaving trails of living light that confused Shadowcorp's targeting systems. The massive Luminary vessel joined the battle, its crystalline weapons firing beams of pure energy that cut through Shadowcorp's shields like they weren't there. But the corporate ships were numerous and relentless. "We can't keep this up forever," James warned, watching his instruments in amazement as the ship performed impossible feats. "We don't have to," Marcus replied through gritted teeth. He could feel the strain on Lyra, the enormous energy she was channeling. "We just need to get to the Luminary ship." A blast rocked the Scout, nearly throwing them from their seats. Warning lights flashed across every console. "Port engine is down," Sarah shouted. "We're losing power." Lyra's face was pale, but her determination never wavered. "One more," she whispered. "One more jump." Marcus understood. Together, they reached for that space between spaces that Lyra had shown them before. The ship shuddered, the lights dimmed, and for a moment, reality itself seemed to bend around them. When the world snapped back into focus, they were inside the Luminary vessel's docking bay. Behind them, the massive doors sealed shut, protecting them from the battle still raging outside. Lyra slumped in Marcus's arms, exhausted but smiling. "We did it," she whispered. The ship shuddered as it entered hyperspace, leaving the Shadowcorp fleet behind. They were safe for now, but Marcus knew they had just taken their first step into a much larger universe. As medical teams from the Luminary ship rushed to help them, Marcus held Lyra close. "You were amazing," he told her. She looked up at him with tired but happy eyes. "We were amazing," she corrected. "Together." Marcus smiled, feeling the truth of her words. Whatever came next, training at the Sanctuary, running from Shadowcorp, or facing whatever other challenges the universe had in store, they would face it as a team. Sometimes the strongest bonds in the universe aren't born from blood or duty, but from a simple promise and the courage to keep it. The Luminary ship carried them deeper into space, toward a sanctuary none of them had known existed. But Marcus realized that he had already found his sanctuary in the trust of a starlit child and the family they had built among the stars. Learning to shine. 3 weeks had passed since their escape from Shadowcorp's hunters. The Stellar Scout drifted quietly in the shadow of a massive gas giant, far from the normal shipping lanes. Inside, the ship had become something more than just a vessel. It had become a school, a training ground, and a home. Marcus watched from the doorway of the cargo bay, now converted into a makeshift training area, as Lyra practiced. The young luminary sat cross-legged in the center of the room, small objects floating around her in complex patterns. Her face showed intense concentration, the cosmic patterns on her skin pulsing slowly with each breath. "Steady," Marcus encouraged softly. "Remember what we discovered. Emotion guides the light." Lyra nodded without opening her eyes. The floating objects, spare parts, tools, even Sarah's favorite coffee mug, began to glow with inner light. Slowly, they started to change, their very molecules responding to Lyra's will. Metal became crystal, crystal became light, and light became something else entirely, something that seemed to exist between dimensions. "That's it," Marcus breathed. "You're doing great." Suddenly, the ship's proximity alarm blared. Lyra's concentration broke, and the objects clattered to the floor. Thankfully, all returned to their original state. Sarah's voice came over the intercom, tense but controlled. "Captain, we've got a situation. You need to see this." Marcus helped Lyra to her feet. In the past weeks, she had grown stronger, more confident. The scared child from Europa was still there, but something else was emerging, something remarkable. She grabbed his hand as they hurried to the bridge, a habit that always made his heart warm. The bridge displays showed what had triggered the alarm. A massive ship hung in space before them, but not a Shadow Corp vessel. This one was different, organic curves and crystalline surfaces that seemed eerily familiar. "It's Luminary," Lyra whispered, her eyes wide. "But that's impossible. They're all gone." The ship's communication system crackled to life. A face appeared on their main screen, humanoid, but with the same starlit eyes as Lyra. The patterns on their skin were more complex, more controlled. "Little star," the being said, that a voice carrying the same musical quality as Lyra's. "We've been searching for you." Marcus felt Lyra's hand tighten in his. Through their growing bond, he felt her confusion, hope, and fear. "Who are you?" he demanded. Lyra said her people were destroyed. "Most were," the being replied sadly. "I am Varen, one of the few survivors of the Luminary High Council. We've been in hiding, gathering our strength, protecting what remains of our kind." Their star-filled eyes fixed on Lyra. "You are not the last, little one. There are others, children like you, saved from the destruction." Tears of light rolled down Lyra's cheeks. "Others, like me?" Varen nodded. "We have a sanctuary, hidden where Shadow Corp cannot reach. We can protect you, teach you to control your powers properly." Marcus felt his heart sink. Of course, this was what Lyra needed. Real teachers, others of her kind. He started to speak, to say they would accompany her to the sanctuary, but Lyra's grip on his hand became almost painful. "I won't go without Marcus," she declared, her voice ringing with power that made the ship's lights flicker. "He promised to protect me, and I promised to protect him." Varen studied them both, those ancient eyes seeming to peer into their souls. "The bond between you is strong," they observed. "Stronger than I've seen between a human and one of our kind. Perhaps," they paused, considering, "perhaps you could both come. There is much you could teach each other." Before Marcus could respond, the ship's emergency sensors screamed to life. James's hands flew across the controls. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. Shadow Corp signatures. Varen's expression hardened. "They followed us. We led them right to you. Quick, dock with our vessel. We can." Shadow Corp. Marcus had heard whispers about them. A megacorporation that operated in the darkest corners of space, beyond any government's reach. They were supposed to be a myth. The ship rocked with weapons fire. Marcus steadied Lyra as they made their way to the bridge. "We need to know what we're dealing with, little one. What do they want with you?" Lyra's eyes filled with tears that seemed to glow from within. "They want what all Luminary children can do. We can reshape reality. Through light. Through energy. But it takes years to learn control. My people, they refuse to give Shadow Corp our secrets. So she couldn't finish." Marcus felt cold rage building in his chest. A genocide for corporate profit. He'd seen too much of that in his years exploring the frontier. "Well, they're not getting you. I promised, remember?" Lyra managed a small smile, and for a moment, the ship's lights brightened. "I remember. Through the light, through the dark, you promised." They reached the bridge just as another blast rocked the ship. James was at the helm, his hands flying over the controls as he weaved through the debris field at the edge of the solar system. Sarah manned the defensive systems, but their weapons were research-grade, barely enough to dent their pursuers' military-grade shields. "We can't outrun them forever, Captain," James said through gritted teeth. "And we can't outgun them." Lyra stepped forward, her small hand reaching for the ship's main console. "I can help, but it might be dangerous. The light, it's hard to control." Marcus knelt beside her, putting his hands on her shoulders. "Whatever you're thinking of doing, you don't have to. We'll find another way." She turned those stellar eyes to him, and he saw ages of wisdom in them, despite her youth. "You protect me. Let me protect you." Before he could protest, Lyra placed her hand on the console. The ship's lights flickered, then went out completely. For a moment, they floated in total darkness. Then, slowly, patterns of light began to spread from where Lyra touched the ship. The same cosmic patterns that moved across her skin, but larger, brighter. The patterns spread throughout the ship, and Marcus felt something change. The engine's hum became a song. The metal beneath his feet felt alive. On their screens, the pursuing ships suddenly stopped, their sensors confused. "They cannot see us," Lyra explained, though her voice was strained. "We are between light and dark, between real and unreal, but I cannot hold it long." Marcus understood. "James, get us out of here. Maximum speed. Sarah, find us somewhere to hide, somewhere they won't think to look." As they fled through the darkness of space, now invisible to their pursuers, Marcus watched Lyra with growing concern. She was doing something impossible, something that defied the laws of physics as he understood them, and it was clearly taking a toll. Finally, when they were sure they weren't being followed, Lyra released her hold on the ship. The normal lights returned, and she collapsed into Marcus' arms, exhausted but smiling. "Thank you," she whispered before falling asleep, "for keeping your promise." Marcus held her close, feeling protective and afraid all at once. They had escaped for now, but he knew this was just the beginning. Shadowcorp wouldn't stop hunting them, and Lyra's powers, amazing as they were, needed guidance, control. They needed help, allies, and above all, a plan. As he looked down at the sleeping child in his arms, Marcus made another silent promise. Not just to protect her, but to help her grow, to understand her powers, and to find a way to honor her lost people. The path ahead was uncertain, full of danger and darkness. But as he watched the starlight play across Lyra's sleeping face, Marcus knew one thing for certain: wherever this journey led them, they would face it together. Sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a simple promise, and the bravest heroes come in the smallest packages. The Stellar Scouts sail on through the void, carrying its precious cargo toward an uncertain future. But for the first time since taking this job, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. Sometimes, he realized, the family you find among the stars is the family you were always meant to have. The first steps. The Stellar Scouts' medical bay hummed with unfamiliar energy. Marcus hadn't left the child's side for the past 12 hours, watching as the ship's automated medical systems tried to make sense of her unique physiology. The silver patterns on her skin continued to shift and pulse, like starlight dancing on water. "Her readings are unlike anything I've ever seen," Sarah said, studying the holographic displays floating above the medical bed. "Her cellular structure, it's not just different, it's evolving, adapting to our atmosphere in real time." Marcus nodded, his eyes fixed on the child's peaceful face. She hadn't woken since their escape from Europa, but her vital signs remained stable. The medical bay's lights dimmed and brightened randomly whenever she stirred, as if responding to her dreams. "The pursuing ships?" he asked, though he hadn't taken his eyes off the child. James's voice came through the intercom. "Lost them near the Kuiper Belt. Use that old asteroid mining route you knew about. But, Captain, they're still out there, and they've put out a bounty." Marcus's jaw tightened. "How much?" "More credits than I've ever seen. They're calling her a stolen prototype, claiming she's corporate property." "She's not property," Marcus growled, his hand instinctively moving to protect the child. "She's a little girl." As if responding to his voice, the child's eyes fluttered open. Those star-filled eyes fixed on him, and Marcus felt that same connection as before, not quite telepathy, but something deeper, more primal. Emotions and images flooded his mind: fear, gratitude, and a desperate need to be understood. "Hey there," he said softly, trying to project calm and safety through whatever link they shared. "You're safe now. I'm Marcus." The child sat up slowly, her movements graceful despite her obvious weakness. She looked around the medical bay with obvious curiosity, reaching out to touch various pieces of equipment. Wherever her fingers made contact, the machines sparked with strange energy, their displays showing impossible readings. "Lyra," she said suddenly, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I am Lyra." Marcus blinked in surprise. "You can speak our language." Lyra tilted her head, those cosmic eyes studying him. "I learn. Fast. From you. From her." She pointed at Sarah, who'd gasped softly. "From the ship itself. Knowledge flows like light." Sarah stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overtaking her caution. "You can interface with our technology. How is that possible?" Instead of answering, Lyra raised her hand. The medical bay's lights dimmed, and above her palm, a miniature galaxy formed, stars and nebulae swirling in perfect detail. Were the luminary. Light is our language, energy our blood." The galaxy in her hand flickered and died, and sadness washed over her face. "I am the last." Marcus felt his heart break at the pain in her voice. "What happened to your people, Lyra?" Before she could answer, the ship's emergency sirens blared. James's voice cut through the chaos. "Captain, we've got company. 3 ships just dropped out of hyperspace. Corporate logos, same as before." Marcus cursed under his breath. How did they find us so quickly? Lyra's face had gone pale, the patterns on her skin moving faster. "They follow the light. My light. I cannot hide it yet. Too young, too untrained." Marcus made a quick decision. "Sarah, get her some clothes from the emergency supplies. James, plot us a course through the Oort cloud. Lots of interference there. We need to buy some time." As Sarah helped Lyra change out of her medical gown into simple black clothing, Marcus felt the ship's engines surge to life. The Stellar Scout might have been small, but she was fast and agile. They had a chance. "They won't stop," Lyra said quietly as Marcus helped her to her feet. Her legs were shaky, but she moved with determination. "The Shadow Corp. They hunt us, study us, try to take our light." That's when he saw them, the markings on the wall behind where she had been suspended. They were different from the others, more urgent, hastily carved. As he watched, they seemed to rearrange themselves, shifting until he could somehow read them. "Protect her. They are coming." A distant explosion rocked the ship. Marcus's comm crackled to life with Sarah's urgent voice. "Captain, multiple ships just dropped out of hyperspace. They're not responding to hails, and their weapons are hot." Marcus looked down at the child in his arms. She stared back, and in that moment, he felt something. A connection, a desperate plea for help that transcended language. He made his decision. "Sarah, prep the med bay. James, get the engines hot. We're leaving, and we're taking her with us." As he carried her back through the dying ship, the child's hand gripped his suit weakly. Where she touched him, patterns of light danced across his suit's surface, like stars being born. "It's okay," he whispered, though he knew she probably couldn't understand him. "I've got you. You're safe now." Behind them, the strange ship shuddered its last breath. As they reached the rescue pod, Marcus caught a glimpse of the approaching vessels, sleek, black ships that seemed to absorb the light around them. Whoever they were, they had arrived. But they were too late. Marcus sealed the pod, firing the thrusters before their attackers could get a lock. As they rocketed back to the Stellar Scout, he held the child close, feeling her shiver against him. He didn't know who she was or why those ships wanted her, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he would protect her, no matter the cost. As they docked with the Stellar Scout, the child looked up at him again. This time, a single word formed in his mind, as clear as if it had been spoken aloud: promise. Marcus met those star-filled eyes and nodded. I promise. The Stellar Scout's engines roared to life, and they fled into the darkness of space, leaving Europa and its mysteries behind. But Marcus knew this was just the beginning. Whoever was after this child wouldn't give up easily, and he had just made himself their enemy. Looking down at the strange, beautiful child in his arms, he realized he didn't regret it for a second. Sometimes the most important promises are the ones we make without knowing the cost. And as the stars streaked by outside, Marcus Chen, who had spent his life searching the stars for meaning, finally felt like he had found it, in the trust of a child who needed him. The chase was on, and the universe suddenly felt a lot bigger and a lot more dangerous. But for the first time since losing his daughter, Marcus felt truly alive. He had a purpose now, a promise to keep, and he would keep it, no matter where across the stars that promise might lead them. A signal in the dark. Captain Marcus Chen stood at the helm of the Stellar Scout, his weathered hands gripping the control panel as he stared into the endless void of space. 20 years of deep space exploration had left their mark on his face, but his dark eyes still held the same curiosity that had first driven him to the stars. The small research vessel hummed quietly around him, its familiar sounds a comfort in the vast emptiness. Captain, we're picking up something unusual, Sarah, his science officer, called from her station. Her voice carried a note of excitement that made Marcus turn. In 15 years of working together, he'd never heard that particular tone. Show me, he said, moving to the console. The display showed a pulsing signal, unlike anything he'd seen before. It wasn't random space noise or the typical chatter of passing ships. This was deliberate, structured. It's coming from the dark side of Europa, Sarah explained, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls. The signal pattern, it's not in any known database. Marcus felt his heart rate quicken. After 2 decades of searching for signs of intelligent life, could this be it? How long has it been broadcasting? That's the strange part, Sarah replied, frowning at her readings. It just started about 10 minutes ago. And sir, it's getting weaker. Marcus didn't hesitate. Plot a course. Maximum speed. The Stellar Scout changed direction, its engines pushing to full power as they headed toward Jupiter's ice-covered moon. As they approached, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just another routine investigation. Something about this signal felt different, almost desperate. When they rounded Europa's dark side, they saw it, a shimmer of light where there should have been none. As they drew closer, the light resolved into a shape, a crashed vessel, unlike any human design. Its hull gleamed with an otherworldly iridescence, even as smoke poured from what appeared to be massive damage to its side. Life signs, Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she read the scanner. 1, very faint, and sir, it's small, child-sized. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He'd lost his own daughter 5 years ago in a colony accident. The thought of a child, any child, alone and hurt. Prep the rescue pod. I'm going out. Captain, his security officer, James, stepped forward. Protocol states. Protocol can wait. Marcus cut him off, already heading for the airlock. There's a child out there. The spacewalk to the crashed ship was tense. Up close, the vessel was even more remarkable. Its design seemed to defy physics, with curves and angles that shouldn't have been possible. Marcus found what looked like an entry point, a tear in the hole large enough to slip through. Inside, the air was thin but breathable. Emergency lights cast an eerie blue glow across corridors that seemed to shift and change as he moved through them. His helmet lights illuminated strange symbols etched into the walls, symbols that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. The life sign indicator led him deeper into the ship, to what must have been some kind of stasis chamber. There, suspended in a field of softly pulsing energy, was a child, but not like any child he'd ever seen. Her skin was a pale silver that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. Delicate patterns, like constellations, moved across her skin. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 by human standards. As Marcus approached, her eyes opened. They were completely black, like looking into the depths of space itself, with tiny points of light that looked like stars. The stasis field flickered and failed. Marcus lunged forward, catching her as she fell. She was surprisingly light in his arms and cold, so cold, but she was breathing.